Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Portobello Institute workshop, and thank you for joining us. I'm Irina Fox, and I have been working with Portobello for quite a number of years as a tutor, and now I'm a program manager for the Early Childhood Studies degree programs, and I'm also involved in developing new programs for our students. I'm very pleased to welcome our guest today, Nóirín Hayes, who is does not really need a lot of introduction, and she has a lot of people have joined today to listen to Nóirín. I was going to say that she's the champion of early childhood education in Ireland, and actually I've learned that she has officially been appointed as the champion and advocate for early childhood education at the OMAP conference that took place last Saturday. And so she was involved in developing the model for early childhood education and care, in developing our frameworks, ASHTA and SHILTA, and I'm really, really pleased to welcome Nóirín today as our guest.
Thank you very much, Irina. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you, Nóirín, and thank you again for joining us. And
not at all,
really
it's a pleasure.
Forward to hearing from you.
Yeah. Well, now have I to fiddle with my screen and try and find my presentation. Apologies to those of you looking now while I get it out. So I go there and I go here.
Yeah. Well, that's.
Am I in? Yeah.
Have you got it, Nóirín?
Excellent.
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah. Lovely stuff. Well, thank you very much indeed for the kind introduction and to the Portobello Institute for inviting me to participate in this webinar series. And I look forward to sharing with you my thoughts on a nurturing pedagogy. I do think I should begin by pointing out something, that what I'll be talking about is the application of this pedagogy in practice in a sort of an optimum best practice situation. And I'm not unaware of the difficulties, the day-to-day difficulties that there are in early childhood, generally speaking, at the moment. And so I'm kind of reminded of the words of Donald Winnicott, a pediatrician who wrote very well, really, about child development and wrote for parents, advising them about understanding their children and being kind of relaxed in their parenting, and suggested that all we can strive to be is a good enough parent. So I'm really introducing this nurturing pedagogy idea with a view to enhancing what might make us all a good enough early childhood educator. And I should, I suppose, locate myself a little bit for you also in terms of the theory that informs my practice. I look at development through a children's rights lens, and I believe very much in the dynamic nature of human development and the fact that we're influenced by the immediate environment around us and the distance environments of policy and culture and so forth, and that we in turn can influence these. And I thought, just to give you a little example of what I mean by that, you'll be seeing my grandchildren, so I might as well introduce them to you and thank them for their permission to use their photographs. But I have one grandchild, a very young grandchild in Australia, and he and I have been in communication only over Skype and FaceTime. But we have influenced each other even in that distant relationship. And so I suppose the point of asking you to embrace the notion of a nurturing pedagogy is to take on board maybe some of the points that I'm making that have informed my understanding of this particular approach, and use it to whatever advantage you can in working directly with children. So there are another couple of beliefs that I have, or assumptions that I make, which I want to share as well. So in relation specifically to childcare, childcare gets talked about a great deal in the media. But generally speaking, when it is being talked about, it's being talked about in terms of adults. So for instance, it's seen as childcare as a service to parents. And we hear about how costly it is, how inaccessible it is in some instances, how it's very difficult, for example, to access childcare for babies, and parents are concerned about that and the impact that it has. Or it tends to be talked about in terms of the conditions and services of staff working in childcare, and indeed they deserve a lot of attention and a great deal of improvement. But really, childcare is about children. They are the people who are directly impacted by childcare, and they are the ones who experience childcare along with their staff in the day-to-day. And so I like to just, I mean, I'm speaking to the converted here when I talk about locating children in the centre of practice. But I suppose part of what I hope, and I say this to my students also, is that the conversation that I have with you this evening, and hopefully the discussion we have at the end, will provide us with a conversation or a language that allows us to explain to those who perhaps don't think about childcare as being specifically about children, to help us explain the unique nature of early childhood education and care. It is, after all, recognised internationally as the first level of education, and it is unique in its practice. It has a unique knowledge base, and it requires a unique skill set. And it is different from parenting, it's different from babysitting, it's different from nursing, and it's different from primary teaching. It is a unique form of practice. And so specifically, it is about reciprocal, respective, and reflective relationships. So it's very people-oriented, it's very process-oriented, and it's very much in the now. And so I hope that as we go through this, we can, between us, find a language that strengthens the way we can explain to people what it is we do when we work in this really critical stage of early education. Children, even the very youngest child, has a lot to say. This actually isn't my Australian grandchild. This is my youngest Irish grandchild. And this photograph was taken a couple of days ago. He's 6 months old now, and he's just being weaned, and he's having an extremely interesting conversation with his mother about whether or not he likes the pancakes that have been provided. But we've all seen this, and this gladdens our heart, because those of us working in early childhood love children and see what's happening here. We can see the eye contact, we can see the mouth wide open and the smile, the complete trust that there is that the person to whom we are talking is hearing what we're saying, even though we don't have the verbal language to say it. So recognizing the agency, the voice, the influence of children right from the get-go is central to my discussing this approach. So what I hope to do this evening is to tell you a little bit about what I mean by nurturing pedagogy. I won't be in a position to go into great detail about it, but just to give you some pointers, describe to you why I feel it's so important and why I stress the centrality of relationships, as opposed to, for example, routines or content. Relationships are really what I'm placing at the centre in the practice. And what exactly does it mean in practice? I thought I'd talk just a little bit about it in the context of play and oral communication, both of which are central to quality early childhood education and care. And I put in that time and space is something I want to talk about as well. It really goes right through the presentation, and I'll probably be quite brief about that, but I didn't want to take it out of the slide lest I would forget it. So I coined the term. I was thinking about the history of this in preparation for today, and it turns out I coined this term back in 2003, which is a lot longer ago than I think, and I have written perhaps less than I should on the idea of a nurturing pedagogy. But it arose in a workshop that I was fortunate to be a participant in Sweden, a workshop actually which arose as part of my work at the time in OMEP. And I went on to use that term in some work I did for the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment when they were developing ASHTR, and they commissioned some background papers. And it really derives, as I say, from this idea that close interactions between children and adults drive development and learning. And we know there's some really wonderful work being done with very young children, which is showing to us that the actual architecture of our brain is modified by the quality of close interactions between people. And that what does this mean? Well, what it means is that it strengthens the sort of neural networks that are happening. It allows for a refining of messaging so that our senses can be stimulated and responses can be responded to quickly. And we know that it is also beginning to build the foundation of part of our brain which develops over time, the prefrontal cortex. And this is the sort of the executive center of the brain. We don't know how it works. We can describe what's happening, and we recognize that early in the early years a great deal of consolidation is happening here in this prefrontal cortex, which is about managing our emotions. It's about our attention. It's about generally managing us, and we, as I say, we have to be a bit careful, because even though we can describe a lot of what's happening now, significantly more than we could even 10 years ago, we still can't actually explain how it happens. But the other point, I suppose, about the nurturing pedagogy, and this is really what's also key, I think, about early childhood education and care, is that the key tools in the process are people. They are the people in the dynamic interactions, and they are the learning opportunities that are provided by the encounters. And I prefer in talking about practice to talk about learning opportunities rather than say learning outcomes. I think outcomes are valuable kind of frame, but actually in the day-to-day, we are in the midst of a process, and adults have this very powerful role for really leveraging the learning opportunities that we can create and that we can use. So the term is a concept that acts as an integrating mechanism for care and education. This binary between care and education has not served those of us working in early childhood education and care at all well. There's a very clear hierarchy when you place care against education, and it's a hierarchy that is very ill-deserved. There's wonderful research being done on the critical importance of care in the lives of us all. And care is so much more than caring for a child. It's about caring about the child, and it's about caring about the world and the world into which the child is growing, and it's about caring for ourselves. And there's a lot written, the work of Nodding and others, and there was a very interesting keynote address at the OMEP meeting mentioned there on Saturday from Jules Page, who writes about the notion of professional love, which is it's a wonderful concept about animating care in our practice. And so I use the term nurture in this phrase, nurturing pedagogy, to capture really and reconceptualize care as a hugely important part of what we do, as active, as thoughtful, as loving, as respectful, as attuned and attentive. It's a really critical part of the practice of quality early childhood education and care. And I thought the term, and have argued that the term nurture enhances or maybe shines a light on the aspects of care that are so critical to our work. And it foregrounds the educative nature of care, which I thought was important, because some people don't think too much about how developmentally important care is for children. I mean, we see it again with babies, that whole kind of what's called in America the serve and return, but this peekaboo kind of idea, this how, you know, the kind of games we play, the language that we play with children, getting children in tune with the rhythm of conversation and that sort of thing, really important. And the notion of nurture also as central to the role of the adult in effective engaging quality practice. And it also allows, the notion allows for a more appropriate practice to emerge from the learning environments. So I think we've got to trust that learning happens in the space we encounter children in, and in our nurturing pedagogy, learning emerges and the curriculum emerges from those kind of interactions. And so why is nurturing important? Well, a nurturing pedagogy enhances children's development and it enriches their well-being. I pulled a lot of research evidence together to support this. And well-being is very important. It's kind of got a bit bandied about. It's a word which has, do you know the way sometimes a word is used so much that it almost becomes meaningless, or it loses its essence? I think well-being is maybe a little bit like that. Play is certainly like that. We need to rehabilitate it a little bit. This book that I have in the list of references by Kickbush, this report which she published in 2012, she highlights these 5 points about why well-being is so important, and I think they're lovely. You know, it's about our present and our future. It promotes life course development for the whole child. It just contributes to a better and more just society. It's really just important, and I think a nurturing pedagogy enhances this. And we know well-being when we see it. This is true of my grandchildren, my eldest granddaughter, my only granddaughter, and the next little lad, her brother, who's now 3. And you know, this idea that children see magic because they look for it. And we need to listen to their magic and find it. And that's where, particularly with these young children, because they're very young. I mean, you know, a 3-year-old has only been on this earth for 36 months. And if you think about, you know, how long we've been going through the pandemic and how long that seems and how much we've learned, you know, it's a short time in which a lot happens. And so that idea of the magic that children afford us the opportunity of finding again is something that makes working with young children really magical. So quality relationships are central to development, and they are a center point of nurturing pedagogy. Relationships between people, but also between materials, and also in the abstract with thoughts, with ideas, with imagination, and also relationships with the indoor and the outdoors. The outdoors being something that I think we've all come to learn. It has so much to offer us. Interactions are that space where this learning happens, particularly that in-between space, that gap is kind of full of the potential for learning there, that in-between. And these everyday interactions, which Bronfenbrenner, who is this sort of theoretician whose work I really follow and espouse, he has called these proximal process the engines of development. And they really are the modus operandi through which a nurturing pedagogy facilitates learning and development. So the evidence I was mentioning is a kind of a converging evidence. It is evidence from neuroscience, from molecular biology, from genomics, more advanced learning in terms of behavioral and social sciences that have highlighted the dynamic of nature. So it's not this notion that we have knowledge to pass on to children. We have skills that children need to learn. We'll guide them in learning those skills. It's much more dynamic and messier even than that. And while it's very helpful to understand about normal development, it's probably useful to think about dynamic development as well. Normative development gives us the kind of benchmarks against which to measure how children are doing. But we know in early childhood, and for that period in children, very much so in the first 2 years, 3 years of life, less so, but still quite a bit in the later period, the range of normality is really quite wide. This was brought home to me very seriously with my own children when my eldest learned to walk at 11 months old and was flying around the place, and you know, really into everything. My second child, on the other hand, sat up from rolling onto the bum and scuttled around on her bum until she was 22 months old. Now I could have worried about that, but she had her 2 free hands. She was making her way around the world. She was doing fine, and she stood up when she was ready. There were other reasons why it was problematic for me, which centered on the fact that when she was about 12 months old, I had another baby. So I had 2 non-ambulant children for almost a year, but that's a whole other story. So science that we're finding, and this kind of intersection between the sciences, clearly highlights that meeting the developmental needs of children in early learning environments is about building that strong foundation for lifelong development and developmental health. It is about that. I've written here, as much as it is about enhancing readiness for school success, in actual fact, you are enhancing readiness for school success when you are spending time building the foundations. And so, for example, it looks different to school, but it doesn't mean it's not enhancing readiness for school. So if you take something like literacy, where we see children, we think of literacy and we think of numbers and recognizing their names and recognizing words and so forth. But in actual fact, pre-literacy, which happens in early childhood, is about pretend play, about imagination, about making something from this, a pen become a rocking horse or a doll or whatever. So we need to hold fast to the evidence that what is being learned in early childhood education and care is really critical to long-term developmental health, and it is different to what is being learned in school. And so I'm very much an advocate of kind of losing the templates, of having a dynamic engagement with books, but that is about the storytelling, the communication, the language, about having environments which are plain enough and not all that awfully full. And being there for children and picking up on what they are going through and what they're bringing into the day. Because we know that developmental and biological disruption in the early years can have immediate and long-term consequences. We can ameliorate some of the immediate consequences. And in so doing, we can enhance the long-term consequences. But we can't solve everything, and there certainly are problems that we come up against where we are not necessarily the professionals to help. But in our field and in what we do, we have a very significant role. So in practice, what does it mean? Well, we know children learn in this integrated way. So when you see children playing with water, they are learning language, they are learning about negotiation, they're learning about sharing, they're learning about self-control, they're learning about science, they're learning about art. It's integrated and it's also embodied. Texture and feeling is that sort of physicality of learning is the way it happens for children. And if you think about memory, when you cast your mind back, and again, I'm sure it's happened to you, the more I became involved in early childhood education and care, the earlier back in my own life I was able to begin to remember. But those memories are pictorial kind of memories. They're memories of something whole. They're not a remembered word, they're a remembered sensation, a remembered feeling, an embodied integrated memory. And that is reflecting the way in which children learn. As they progress towards being 5, being 6, they then begin to get interested in more disaggregated learning and learning about things to do with maths, things to do with history, things to do with the other subjects, which are introduced then in primary school. And we have a powerful role in creating learning contexts which facilitate this. Such environments encourage what Bronfenbrenner would call positive generative dispositions. And these are dispositions like curiosity, persistence, responsiveness, attention, self-regulation, engaged activity. And we can create environments that encourage this. And we can create environments that inhibit more disruptive dispositions like impulsiveness, explosiveness, distractibility, and so forth. And I think it's important to appreciate that impulsive, explosive inattentiveness is actually not always abnormal in young children. And again, it's our skill in understanding when it is becoming problematic that allows us perhaps to intervene and to provide distraction. The concept then of nurturing pedagogy recognizes the educative role of care as nurture. It recognizes the importance of relationships, and it recognizes the role of playful interaction, exploration, and dialogue, and collaborative learning in supporting young children's learning. So it's a busy pedagogy. But the thing about it is that in my experience in talking with students about this and in suggesting the applications of some of the skills, it actually enriches ourselves in our practice, because it makes sense of a lot of what we do. And then the central concept behind pedagogy is that it provides this integrating space for care and education. It also allows a form of assessment for and of learning, and it acts as a guide to an emergent and a responsive early childhood curriculum. And in many ways, this makes the kind of teaching, and I'll explain that word in a moment, it makes the kind of teaching that we do through care and education very challenging, conceptually quite a challenge. We don't have a prescribed curriculum which we can work our way through. We have a population of children in any given room at any given time creating the content that makes the curriculum. And again, that's something that we have to find a language that allows us explain that to people who think of education in terms of given curriculum. And the Ashter curriculum framework followed on from the kind of really around, I'm not really sure when, but the early 2000s, the idea of really developing explicit curricular frameworks rather than the standard curriculum became more commonplace in early childhood, for early childhood education and care. And within that, although I don't think Ashter names the emergent curriculum, it certainly has become, over the implementation of Ashter, it has become a central part of it. And a nurturing pedagogy is that style of practice which, through care and education, I'm using the word facilitate a lot, but it empowers the responsive and emergent curriculum. And so I want to talk a little bit about, how am I doing in time? Okay, about the potential of play. I throw my eye every so often to the right because I can see myself and my timer here. So I was taken, I mentioned on Winnicott before, I was quite, one of the things he pointed out that there is for many a poverty of play. And this is true when you look around our cities. When you see planning applications which have, a kind of a barren green space nominated somewhere, but mostly it's about ensuring that there's roadways and car parking spaces, where you have cities that are so traffic full that there isn't a safe place for children to walk. There is a poverty of play. And again, this is the great contribution that early childhood education settings can make. We can create a rich, safe, risky environment within which children can play. And the powerful developmental role that play has. It's funny, play has been written about extensively. There are libraries full of books, articles. You could read play till it was, coming out your ears. I do a module on play in one of the courses I teach too. And it's really interesting to try and drill down to talk about play in a way that is both meaningful and realistic. But we know that with careful support and scaffolding from adults, children can learn through play. They can learn and move from naive understandings of the world to a much more scientific and detailed understanding of the world. And sometimes they can trip us up as adults and they can ask us a question which we don't have the answer to. And with somebody who is thinking about early childhood education and care from the lens I'm suggesting, we are confident enough to turn around and say, well, you know what, maybe we can try and find out what the answer to that question is together. Or if we can't do it here and now, I'll go away and I'll have a look and I'll see what I can find, and I'll come back tomorrow or the next day or next week, and we'll talk about this idea again and see what we can do. So children's play observed reveals their thinking. And if we can actually capitalize on their thinking and enrich other people, you know, not all children at the same moment are going to come up with a kind of an aha moment or a brilliant idea or a suggestion that prompts something in us. But when any child does, it allows us enrich the experiences of other children as well. So it's a balance between the individual child and the group as well, and making that work for all children and for us. So in the nurturing pedagogy, the key components of the adult role really are what I call low intervention and high response. Now, that doesn't mean low intervention as kind of standing by and waiting until you hear the squeal or until somebody comes up and pulls you by the coat and says, you know, can you do this for me or help me with that? Low intervention really means that you know your children well, you know your environment well, you know your day well, you've picked up on the atmosphere, you're listening, you've got eyes in the back of your head, you've turned on your kind of radar to be picking up all of these things. And basically at the back of it all, you have a deep knowledge about children's development, about the importance of play, about how to have and make a learning opportunity rich, when you can come in with a shared experience, when you can intentionally play. And I mean intentionally teach. And the issue of teaching is important because I heard a lovely distinction the other day, which I like, because using the term teaching in early childhood education and care in Ireland is a bit like using the word curriculum was 20 years ago. It sets a sort of a frisson around because we think of teaching very much embodied in school classroom teaching. But actually, it was suggested to us that teaching is a process, and that instruction is an action, and that what we maybe think about when we think about teaching is the action of instruction, whereas actually when we talk about the process of early childhood education and care, we can really allow that to be called teaching as well. And you know what, children call us teachers, and certainly parents call us teachers often. So despite pronouncements on the importance of play, its status can be problematic. And I have, by my reckoning, about 2 minutes, so I'll be really quick on this. We can be asked to provide play as a way of achieving learning outcomes such as the school readiness outcomes, you know, that we're getting children preschool ready for school, or we're asked to provide play because it supports the free natural expression of individual children's needs. And FLIR in 2011 actually identified this problem as a theoretical problem. And she asked us to think about how can concept formation be fostered within a play-based curriculum so that the important social outcomes for children that we know are really critical, those foundational outcomes, are not lost. And this is a quote which I like. You'll be getting these slides when I'm finished, and you can read it yourself. But it's about the unity of imagination and reasoning coming together in a play-based program, which can actually help develop concepts. And I give you a link there to really some wonderful work she's doing, great articles, lovely examples. So finally, briefly, oral communication. Children are not things to be molded, but they're people to be unfolded. This is my Australian grandson and my daughter there. There are 100 languages of childhood. We need to look out for them all. Oral language is important, and it's the way we give voice to children's body language. Drama, gesture, dance, expression, all those languages need to be unlocked and listened to. And the ability to facilitate this is really, really important because it helps children learn to think and make sense about the world. It's an important interpersonal dimension, and it has an important content dimension. And actually, I think really we need to give more time to developing oral language skills in early childhood education and care than perhaps we have thought about in the past. So a nurturing style is giving voice to children, helping them reflect, hypothesize, think about what if, and not sort of asking the obvious question with an obvious answer. It expands, elaborates, and engages. And in this way, we develop children's vocabulary, we broaden their view of the world, and we advance their grammatical structures as well. And good educators recognize the important role that they play and give time to conversation and chat. And that's where this time and space comes in. We need to, as it were, ditch the routines, not ditch them entirely, good to have them, but see how we can make the experience more fluid, because time and space, time to be alone, space to move about, are going to be the great scarcities of tomorrow. I think they are becoming the scarcities of today. We're so busy doing, so busy getting somewhere, so busy checking off this, doing that, that we forget that what we're really about in early childhood education and care is giving ourselves as an instrument to the children we work with and nurturing in them their potential through our work. And so realizing a nurturing pedagogy requires confidence, self-awareness, solid knowledge base, a trust in children, something I could talk for hours, and a commitment to quality. Children need us to really get it, and they need the time and the space in which to develop. And can I say one thing briefly about the very young children? I saw a disturbing tweet, I think, or maybe a Facebook comment some weeks ago, where somebody in Ireland made the comment that they hadn't done an early childhood education and care degree to change nappies. And I was thinking, nappy changing is a crucial part of our work in nurturing children's development and learning, as is feeding. You know, feeding a baby with the bottle. You do it this way, with your eye contact, not with your eye on a phone while the baby sucks away on the bottle, because that's what that barren kind of notion of what care is. That's where we need to move away from that idea, and recognize, as I'm absolutely certain the majority of you do, that opportunity when you have a child close to you and you're feeding them, to engage with them, to kind of chat to them about the world and things that are going on while they're sucking away, and encouraging them to feed and nurture themselves with their food, we're nurturing their mind. So a nurturing pedagogy requires that we nurture ourselves. Achieving it in practice, defending it against prevailing policy, is challenging. I would love you to embrace a nurturing pedagogy and mind yourselves in the process. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Nóirín. It was really thought-provoking and enlightening presentation. So a lot of very interesting ideas for everyone to think on and reflect on. Thank you very much. And if anybody has questions, please feel free to pop them into the chat and we will ask Nóirín later. Now I'd like to introduce our next guest, who is our Portobello Institute master's student. We are really proud of our students and the work they do, and the kind of practical demonstration of all the theory that we are learning that they can showcase in their presentations. And so I would like to welcome Kelly Doggen, who is the owner of Kickstart Education, and she is going to speak about that kind of responsive pedagogy and looking for teachable moment around the teaching of STEAM, the area that really interests us as a team in Portobello Institute. Welcome, Kelly, and I'm giving the word to you now. And if you have questions again for Kelly, you'll have an opportunity to ask them in the end of the session, so please feel free to pop them into the chat.
Hi, Irina. Thanks a million. Hi, everyone. So obviously a massive thank you for the opportunity tonight with Portobello. Extremely difficult to follow the amazing Nóirín Hayes. I'm just going to share my screen so we can get going. So this particular presentation titled Supporting STEAM Language Through a Nurturing Pedagogy. So we are going to hopefully look at how to understand the concept of STEAM as an integrated approach supportive of the inquiring mind. We want to consider STEAM learning and its relevance to the child. We're going to consider how STEAM supports the Asher framework, specifically the thematic aspect of communicating, and to explore the discourse of STEAM language, and of course to consider our roles as practitioners and carers in supporting STEAM and associated STEAM language discourse. So to start, I just thought this quote was quite pertinent and very relevant to early years. It states, "All the world is a laboratory to the inquiring mind." So as we, I guess, contemplate this phrase, inquiring mind, we'll kind of start by acknowledging really that STEAM experiences occur naturally around us. We all know that children are natural scientists, that they naturally inquire and are curious at the world around them, and therefore often engage naturally with STEAM discourse. So currently we do strive as practitioners to nurture our settings in catering for the active and competent inquiring early years child. And by considering the integrative approach of STEAM, it gives us opportunities to elevate our settings to more innovative and creative spaces that fully embrace, engage and nurture the naturally incurring, inquisitive early years mind of the 21st century. So what exactly is STEAM, I guess, and why as practitioners should we consider STEAM in our early years settings? So I have to hold my hands up. I was extremely naive and completely misunderstood STEAM. I saw it as a subject-based approach, reliant on outcome-based pedagogy, and I guess pronouncing that preparedness of the child for the future roles within those STEAM-related industries. But thankfully, research shows that STEAM is actually the complete opposite of this. So STEAM is recognised really as an inquiry-based approach to early years, and this predisposes the child to active and hands-on learning, set within an ethos of inquiry and problem solving, empathetic to the child's innate curiosities, intrinsic motivations, and natural inquisitive being. So therefore, STEAM provides an integrated approach to early years, offering that nurturing platform from which the 21st century disciplines can be explored, ensuring the early years child fosters important dispositions of learning required in today's busy and ever-evolving world. So as practitioners, we hear the phrase learning dispositions all the time. So let's consider this phrase a little bit further through discussing STEAM and its relationship with capability discourse. So STEAM avoids measurable outcome discourse, and it places the emphasis on processes and disposition of learning, valuing the contributions of the child and everyday practice, and in turn provides enriched day-to-day play experiences fundamental to the enhancing of the capabilities of the curious child. So STEAM also supports those unmeasurable capabilities of children by facilitating key learning dispositions such as reasoning, predicting, hypothesizing, problem solving, and critical thinking, key aspects to resilient, independent, and successful 21st century living. So therefore, it's clear that STEAM in early years is avoidant of those didactic methods of teaching and those goal-orientated practices. Instead, it places emphasis on co-learning with the child, fully focuses on the child within the present moment, intent on enhancing capabilities. So as we start to look at the relationship between STEAM, language and communication, we'll just quickly consider the STEAM acronym in relation to language. So S for science. So children are natural scientists, finding patterns, making links and building theories. By adopting a scientific approach, we open up scientific language and that of observing, questioning, predicting, experimenting and discussing within the realm of communication. Technology. So technology tools and activities provide insight into how things work, linking language to that cause and effect. Engineering is the application of science, mathematics, and problem-solving skills that lend to design, crafting, and building, placing emphasis on language of construction and design. So A for arts. This allows a creative platform and links language to innovation and problem solving through active and self-guided discovery, supporting cognitive development and esteems. And finally, M for mathematics. So we all know that mathematics is much more than just number. It encompasses operations, measurements, and spatial sense. And provides that platform for an array of mathematical reasoning and conceptual mathematical language. So there is a simple yet clear and parallel link between language and STEAM. And simply put, everyday language promotes STEAM thinking, and STEAM thinking promotes everyday language. So STEAM sits explicitly within naturally occurring everyday language and is enhanced through the areas of collaborative communication and the relation aspects of the STEAM approach. Simply put, STEAM and language work in unison. The more enriched the STEAM experiences, the more children will engage naturally, seeking answers, solving problems through their acquiring comprehension and language capabilities. So let's consider this element of STEAM and language a little bit further. So by presenting STEAM language as a discourse. So Professor Lee states, language is about more than vocabulary. It is about discourse. So when we consider discourse as a way of talking based on our experiences and knowledge, we begin to see that STEAM exhibits its own particular discourse of language. The STEAM areas themselves as individual components will of course have their own associated discourse. You know, for example, an architect will speak architecturally, a mathematician will speak mathematically. We could either consider ourselves in early years, we have our own particular discourse of early years language. So as a consequence, STEAM language discourse, it not only combines specific vocational language rooted in scientific inquiry, but STEAM language discourse also introduces and supports new ways for children to express new ideas and concepts. So just want to take a moment to reflect on the fact that STEAM is for all ages, and there may be misconceptions that STEAM as an approach may not be suitable for our younger early years children because the perceived and associated language is perhaps seen as too scientific or perhaps too specific in nature. However, we do need to remember that our youngest of children explore, investigate and experiment without predominantly resorting to language to access the meaning. So through play, experimentation, hands-on and real-life STEAM experiences, we support the youngest of children in gaining a deeper sense and understanding of the world around them. As each child begins to build a deepening understanding of emerging concepts, the child subsequently absorbs associated comprehension, expression, and vocabulary of the STEAM language register and discourse. This moves us on to making explicit connections between STEAM language discourse and that of making meaning by being conscious to speak STEAM. So we now recognize that STEAM facilitates children with real life learning experiences. By integrating STEAM into our settings, a natural and collaborative disposition of co-learning emerges, providing a nurturing platform for meaningful learning. So we must always remember that the adults who speak to children have the opportunity to encourage capabilities and those unmeasurable aspects of hidden pedagogy within the learning dispositions of inquiry, motivation, reflection, and problem solving. And therefore, as practitioners, we should afford as many opportunities as we can to speak STEAM by incorporating problem solving and STEAM-rich language within the discourse of our settings. This moves us on to consider what we mean by STEAM-rich language and how practitioners can play a crucial role within this. So practically, we are already facilitating STEAM language, but we may not be fully aware of the extent and or the possibilities. So let's look at some practical examples that resolve around STEAM language and STEAM vocabulary. So the way adults speak to children will encourage the reflection, inquiry, and problem solving. And therefore, as practitioners, we must speak STEAM by incorporating problem solving and STEAM-rich language into all activities. So STEAM vocabulary is central and provides the building blocks to express ideas. It includes words such as observe, predict, investigate, discover, explain, similar, different, compare, contrast, measure, count, hypothesize, explore, experiment, test, record, guess. So children may naturally engage in STEAM play, but they need the language and the vocabulary to be able to talk about what they are exploring. So in short, STEAM provides children with real life hands-on activities for using language and building those communication skills. How, as practitioners, can we support STEAM language discourse? And one way is through the use of the inquiry circle. Displayed there in the diagram for you. So I guess this is a thinking tool for practitioners, and the inquiry circle, although it is presented in a cyclical process in the diagram, should be considered as flexible, because as we know, children are very unpredictable, and as a supportive practitioner, we want to support their flexible thinking and those critical reflections as they go back and forth, exploring their ideas and their emerging thoughts. So the inquiry circle prompts the practitioner to support children in developing comprehension and communication skills as the children make their predictions, plan, explore, describe, find, and explain their reasoning. Let's make links to Ashter here and that thematic aspect of communicating. So Dr. M in a recent blog emphasizes how our Ashter framework advocates thematic focus of communicating, which is underpinned by interactional opportunities, whereby children need to be encouraged to speak, talk, and engage with others. This places emphasis on the nurturing adult, responsive to moments of STEAM interactions and STEAM language opportunities. Dr. M continues to explain that the adult plays a pivotal role in supporting children's emerging concepts and will not only help children develop communicatively, but ensure children are resilient and independent, promoting positive well-being. So by extending the role of the practitioner to support STEAM discourse, practitioners enhance children's developmental concepts that are required to become competent, innovative, critical thinkers, capable of coping with problems, resolving issues, and ultimately supporting emotionally intelligent individuals with the life skills for 21st century successes. Let's just recap really quickly. So STEAM promotes learning experiences that allow children to explore, questions, research, discover, and exercise innovative conceptual skills, and more so provides early years children with a natural occurring environment for problem solving, collaboration, and communication. So STEAM opens up flexible spaces of learning, effective through collaborative and communicative opportunities of play, which are supported by the nurturing and competent early years practitioner within their educative roles of care and education. Okay, so now let's consider the role of the adult within STEAM and STEAM language through a capability-focused and enriched environment. So I couldn't help it, I have to put that image in there. I'm a preschool teacher, what's your superpower? So we know we have many, but in terms of supporting STEAM language discourse and promoting that inquiry-based culture of pedagogy, let's consider what we need to do here. So we need to facilitate engagement. An important emphasis is placed on engaging in back and forth STEAM communications, as this deepens practitioners' insight and relationships to each child, central to effective learning and supportive of those quality interactions. So we also need to support meaning making, allow the child to make connections of meaning by building on prior knowledge, making links to previous learning, and building upon schemas. We need to encourage a growth mindset where children are able to make mistakes and problem solve with resilience and independence. We need to ensure empathetic learning, where learning occurs collaboratively in a trusting, safe, and nurturing environment. We need to nurture wonder and curiosity, as these are these natural dispositions and determinations of an early years child. We need to also facilitate open-ended thinking and inference skills and support those critical reflections. So by adopting these aspects, the practitioner naturally engages frequently as a co-learner and facilitator of learning, supporting and extending those life dispositions and capabilities that we've discussed.
Hello, sorry. I just need to intervene. I'm sorry, because we just need to leave a little bit of time for questions. We're running out of time, so sorry to cut this short, Kelly, but it's really, really interesting, really great examples of kind of showing how this responsiveness can work in practice. And I think we will invite Nóirín back in now, if possible. And thank you very much again for joining us, and thank you for everyone who asked questions. So, and there are a lot of interesting comments coming in, and really, yes, everyone is impressed with, again, listening to these ideas of being, looking for teachable moments and looking at pedagogy, something as nurture rather than routines. And so the questions are Catherine McGrath and Denise Sheridan. They were kind of similar questions that they're asking about. So what has to happen now? What change? And that's a question to Nóirín, I suppose. What is the first thing that has to change for everybody to embrace nurturing pedagogy? Nóirín.
Well, that's a huge question. And I mean, Kelly, I really liked your presentation, and I think using STEAM as a vehicle to kind of animate the ideas behind a nurturing pedagogy is really interesting. And I hope that the link between your work, and you might link into, although you may be familiar with Marilyn Fleur's work as well. But the first step, I think, really is it's probably something that we have when we start working, most of us, with young children. We really want to work with young children because we like them and we care to, we really want to grow and develop with them and facilitate that. But then we need to support each other in that. I think that's really the next first step, because there are a lot of challenges external to our practice, which begin to kind of encroach on the time and space needed to actually allow a nurturing pedagogy to unfold. So, for example, parents do have expectations about what they want their children to do, and maybe not so much with the very young children, but certainly as children are getting older, only by 3, there's people are beginning to make demands. And then there are the external regulatory systems and mechanisms where I think we need as a profession to, stand up and be counted for what we need to do to make early childhood education and care what people anticipate it will be, because just providing it doesn't make it happen. It's the quality of what you provide.
Thank you, Nóirín. Thank you. And now I'll ask Kelly. So, when you gave us very good examples of STEAM. So do you do you plan your STEAM activities, or is it you do totally in a responsive, you practice totally in a responsive manner?
Yeah, definitely just that responsive manner, Irina, just being conscious to use the particular, language that's just associated with that inquiry-based approach, but certainly responsive and integrative approach. And I think I said initially that, I completely misunderstood it. I thought it was completely goal orientated. It was about teaching maths from, 9 to 10 and science from 10 to 11. I was like, oh my God, why are people going down this route? But it's not, hopefully we can see as an integrative approach and being conscious about the discourse of language through it, how we can really support our early years children.
Yeah.
And I think if I can come in there, Irina, that the circle, that sort of map you had about, that kind of going from here to there and here to there, that's a very useful backdrop to have. And I think from what you're saying, that's how you're thinking of it, that is something you hold in your mind, you know it in your mind and you embody it, so that you don't even need to have that around when you're actually working directly with the children. It's just informing the way you practice and respond to those learning opportunities. You captured that really nicely.
Yeah, really great example of that concept formation, isn't it? With children. And Natasha Murphy asked a question: whether you observe any gender differences when you're bringing STEAM to children? I suppose it's a question to Kelly, but if Nóirín wants to.
Nóirín, please go. I think gender differences in early years, it comes maybe from our personal attitudes and our personal assumptions. I think if you have an awareness of it, you're opening up, a platform for every child to explore anything that's of interest to them. And if that's a boy looking to put on the makeup and the high heels, well, fantastic. Let's nurture that opportunity and move that forward.
I think there's a role for us to help parents perhaps appreciate that, that there is an openness to all the elements of STEAM in all children to differing degrees. One of the wonderful things about early childhood education and care is that it has never been segregated as Irish education has been segregated between girls and boys. It's never, it's a very holistic approach. And I think the issue around gender differences and the tendency to be kind of predisposed to expecting the boys to think about building the blocks and the girls to think about caring in the little Wendy house or whatever. We need a conversational language to actually get the points you were talking about across and the points I was trying to get across out to a wider audience, so that we're free to do what we know is really best for children.
Yes, thank you, Nóirín. Yeah, and now there's another question from Anne, and it's more to do with history. Yes, are we bringing any familiar concepts here? And yeah, to me again, Regia Emilia Montessori steps in mind with her idea of developing, concepts for children. What can you say, Nóirín?
Yeah, I mean, I've struggled a little bit with this in the beginning around what's sort of unique about a nurturing pedagogy, and really I suppose it's what I'm trying to do with it, which is to try and break the binary between what is caring and what is educational. And so it combines elements of what's called relational pedagogy, what can be called STEM education, conceptual, sustained shared thinking. It's a holistic approach, but the kind of unique thing about it is to try and give a language to the essence of early childhood education and care, which is not about the binary between care and education, because I'm concerned that there is a sort of a move or a trend in certain countries, and I think Ireland is one, where childcare is seen as the sort of caring end of things, and early education, which is kind of what happens in the free preschool year, for example, that's education. And I'm trying with the concept of nurturing pedagogy to really break that binary and point to the integrated nature of early childhood education across the ages and across the different settings.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Yes, that's good explanation to give us the idea, how the theoretical framework comes in. And now Yvonne is asking, how would you approach explaining to parents the importance of nurturing pedagogy?
You want to believe in it yourself. And I think Kelly, a lot of your language was exactly the kind of language I'd like to hear people, when you talk to your parents, when they come for an introduction to what you do and so forth. I mean, what Yvonne's question is saying to me is, that I've got to write this book. just another thing to be done. But it does seem to me as if we've got to get a conversation going among ourselves and finding comfort with that language, because you were well able to weave in with the points I'm making about responsive, attuned, engaged. They're the kind of words we need. But we need to believe it ourselves and talk about it ourselves, among ourselves as well.
Nóirín, I think that's so important, because as a practitioner, it wasn't until I read your research that the penny dropped, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in that category that has equated education a lot more than to my care role. You know, and I was one of those that dismissed the nappy changing and did not see the value of that. And of course, when we're changing a nappy, it opens up language opportunities. It opens up all of those relationship opportunities just as much as counting to 5, for example. So just as a practitioner, thank you for that, because it helps in our professional identities as well. You know, it's really lending a substance, as you know, to us as early years educators in our identity, you know, in that professional identity. So thank you for that.
I'm delighted, because it's really what I'm trying to do, because education gets privileged everywhere over the care dimension of early childhood education and care.
And coming back to your book, Nóirín, Nurturing Pedagogy, I found it personally really enlightening book, really informing, and it is really it's difficult to get hands on it anymore. You cannot get it on Amazon. So I was wondering, is there a second edition coming, or is there going to be another lot?
No, there actually, as it happens, there is a second edition coming. However, don't get excited, because we've only, Margaret, who wrote it with me, we've only just begun. But I have it here, you know, and it's thumbed and there's all sorts of things. So we're working on a second edition. And the reason it's out of print is because Gill and Macmillan, who published it, have ceased publishing academic texts. And so it and the other book that I like, Engaging Young Children, Early Years Practice, both of these books are out of print for that reason. And so I'm working on getting new editions of both.
Yeah, that's exciting news.
Yeah. Now I've said it publicly.
And then we have another question from Vasila, who is saying, she's trying to develop the theoretical concept that you proposed, nurturing pedagogy, and reflect on it. Yes, if it is healthcare is based on communication, interaction, and play.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about the nurturing pedagogy is it's an effort to sort of integrate the elements. You know, the concern can be that the whole child approach is about the child. You know, communication and interaction and play can be about the adult, getting, you know, planning it and doing it and providing it and assessing it and all of that type of thing. And what I'm trying to do in a nurturing pedagogy is get the notion that this is actually an enmeshed process that we are just a part of. And what we are in that process is informed by what we know and the skills we bring, but also by the child and the reality of the day-to-day moment of that child. And so in the question, can we consider as a new name? It's not so much a new name for the whole child approach. It's actually challenging that approach a little bit to move it to the whole child in context of which we are a part. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Nóirín. Yeah. So I think maybe that word pedagogy is the key, because then you are as a pedagogue there too, yes, with the child. So it's is that what is the best age to introduce STEAM? Yeah, that's a question on to Kelly. Yeah, and I'm sure Nóirín has something to say too.
Again, it's not about age. You know, the minute children are born into the world, they're exploring, they're inquiring. You know, so it's not, again, because it's not a goal-orientated practice, or it's not branded within that outcome-based practice. You know, it is about that integrative approach of just looking at those different conceptual elements. So, you know, the minute they're born, if you need to put an age on it, just because it naturally occurs for them as, you know, those as inquisitive children or inquisitive babies, as we should say.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kelly. And a very interesting question from E.T. Do you think it is something that can be taught or something? Natural?
If you use teaching in the way I was describing it, as it was recently described, if you use teaching as a process, then I think you can teach a nurturing pedagogy, because it does have a knowledge base, but it also has specific skills, some of which I try to outline briefly in the presentation. So it's about actually unearthing that those skills, and from that point of view, it can be taught. However, it needs to be nurtured, and it will only flourish in an environment that is recognizing of an early education practice, an early education and care practice that we have described. So it can, like, you can encourage it, teach it, grow it, develop the skills, enhance the knowledge. But as a team, you've got to believe it and work it as well to realize it in practice.
Yeah, and I can see the phone number popped up for admissions, and I think getting more educated, upskilling, and getting education again, that opens up the mind to all the ideas that are there, and that helps to promote nurturing pedagogy in the settings. And as Kelly was an example, she said she actually has changed her mind as she embraced on that journey of learning. Yes, so that does help. And thank you for all these questions. There's another one. Olive is asking to show the book again. Nóirín.
That's it. But it's actually it is. I've referenced it in the list of references on the slide. So it's and in a more recent book that I've co-authored on Bronfenbrenner, introducing Bronfenbrenner, there's a section on a nurturing pedagogy there as well.
Okay, thank you, Nóirín. Thank you very much for this very engaging conversation, and thank you to everyone who took part. Thank you for all the comments. It was a pleasure really to present Nóirín and to take part in it, and to meet Kelly and to see what kind of work she's doing. I think they complemented each other really well today, so thank you.
We won't tell them that we actually worked together to get it, which we didn't do.
I should be so lucky, Nóirín.
I think good practice is good practice everywhere, and it's great to see that it's.
I really enjoyed your presentation, Kelly. It was lovely.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. That's amazing to hear that from you, Nóirín. So
I look forward to seeing your MA.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.